Thank you, Father. Thank you for the time that we get to make challah. We love you and praise you, and we dedicate this time to you. Let it be a joyous time that we can reflect on family, friends, nations, our congregation, and let our hearts be turned to you, and give us wisdom and your insight. We love you and praise you in your precious name. Amen. Hi, welcome to Challah 101. My name is Jana, and I'm going to make challah with you this morning. We're going to go step by step. I've posted the recipe and the ingredients on this site, so have that in front of you, and then everything that you're going to need. So as you can see, I've got many yeasts that you can use. The one that I particularly like is the Saf instant yeast, and then there's also the Fleshman's Active or the instant. Now, many people ask me what's the difference between active and instant. The main thing is the active has a coating on it. So if you're going to use that, you want to make sure it hits the water, and the water has to be at temperature between 110 and 115. So use whatever you have available, or whatever you're comfortable with. I'm going to use the Saf instant this morning, and so we're going to start with 3/4 tablespoon. If you don't have a zero scale, which I'm using throughout this video, that's fine. I have the measurements for weight or volume. So if you don't have one, mine's set at grams, and I'm going to use 8 grams of yeast. So go ahead and do that. Get started on your bowl as well. So we're making this together. And then my water I've already heated. I use purified water, and then I also heat it to get to the temperature 110 to 115. You don't want it any colder than that, because you want your yeast to activate and bloom. And the water in this step 1, we are going to use 175 grams. If you're using measuring cups, that's a 1/2 cup or a 1/2 cup plus 1/3 cup. And this recipe makes about 1 large loaf or 2 small, so you can decide what you want to do. If you want to save one for later, that's fine. Almost there, 175. Perfect. Okay, and then in this step, we are also going to add 151 grams of flour. Now, I like to stir this up a little bit, especially if you're using the active. You want to make sure that it's all blended in. I use the instant, so really it doesn't matter. You can put all your ingredients in there, and it's gonna activate, just because there's no coating on it. It's just a straight yeast instant. We're going to add 151 grams or 1 cup of flour. I added a little bit too much, but I can scoop it out. The beautiful thing with the zero scale is it's 10% more accurate using the scale than you would by just measuring with the measuring cup. That's why I like it so well. Okay, once you get those 3 ingredients in there, go ahead and take I use a dough hook. It just helps mix all those ingredients together, but if you're using a wooden spoon or whatever you're comfortable with, getting that stirred in, this is nice because it just starts developing that gluten and the strands that happen here. One thing I'd like to note is you'll notice I'm using King Arthur bread flour, and that's available at Fry's most of the time. I mean, during this COVID thing, it's been hard to get, so it's a wonderful flour, and you can experiment, but it has the most protein in it. It has 12.7. It's just a wonderful way to. It's just a wonderful flour to make bread challah with. So you'll notice before I set this aside to rise or ferment, get that yeast activated, I covered it with saran wrap. That's to keep it warm in there. And you want to cover it with a towel. That'll just really help that bloom, that step 1 yeast really, really nice. We'll pick back up on step 2. All right, let's get started. Step 2. And again, I'll have this in the link. It'll have it set up, first step ingredients, second step ingredients. Let's do all our dry ingredients first. In my zero scale, I'm going to need 378 grams of flour. And again, that's 2.5 cups. What I love about the zero scale is usually You don't have to add any extra flour when it comes time to knead the dough. It just measures so beautifully. As I make a mess. But we'll talk about that when we get to that point. So 2½ cups. I wouldn't put any more in there than that whenever you're doing your measurement. All right, 378. Okay, next we're going to do our sugar. And for sugar, I just do 1/2 cup. You can put as little or as a lot that you want. You know, just feel free to adjust that if you need to. Some people put double. It's whatever you like. So again, we're going to do 113 grams or 1/2 cup. Brown sugar, I like to do 8 grams, or basically like 3/4 of a tablespoon, if again you don't have a 0 scale. And that's a little bit much. There we go. So again, we're putting all the dry ingredients in first. And next is the kosher salt. Kosher salt, we want again 8 grams, or 3/4 tablespoon of kosher salt. Perfect. And then just use your dough hook or your stirring mechanism. Just stir those ingredients up. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just get them mixed in. We'll have it mix for 7 to 10 minutes later. Set that aside. And now we need to add our wet ingredients, but we need to make sure we put them with our slurry. So bring that back out. It's been sitting and it looks really beautiful. See how there's bubbles in there? I would say a good, let's see, it's got frothiness, it's activated the yeast. That's how you know your yeast did its job. So when you see that, bubbles, light, fluffy, airy, that's gonna make for some great challah. We're gonna add in the eggs first. And I like it, well, they have to be at room temperature, but I like to lay mine in some warm water so it gets them to room temperature fast. So if you don't have yours setting out for a long time or ready to go, just put them in some warm water and then they're just easier to stir when they're at room temperature. I always break one at a time because you want to make sure it's kosher, meaning that there's no blood on the egg. If there is, just don't use it. After each egg, just stir it up, get that slurry going. And just look how beautiful that looks. All the stringiness and the glutens are really working with that flour. It just looks beautiful. All right, then once you get that, add your other egg in there. So that's why I do one egg at a time, just to make sure that they're kosher, good, clean eggs. This one looks great. And you don't want any eggshells in your challah. Stir that up. And our last wet ingredient is going to be the coconut oil. And I already have that measured out, so I'm not going to use my scale for that. It's 50 grams, or it's 1/4 cup if you do not have a 0 scale. Stir that up. You'll see them, if you do have a KitchenAid mixer, I cheat. I do, and I have done it by hand. It's just so nice to be able to just turn the switch on. One of the beautiful things about making challah when you do it by hand is it's a beautiful time to just pray and intercede for your family, friends, congregation, our nation. It's just a time to just reflect. And so I encourage you to do use that time for that. For me, even though I do use a KitchenAid, I still have prayer time and intercede for on behalf of my friends, family, and nation. So you're going to take your dry ingredients that you've already mixed up, just dump them in there in your bowl. And then if you don't have a mixer, just start stirring. It's going to start getting you that stringy strands you saw earlier in the slurry dough. That's a good thing. That makes a really nice dough. Now I'm going to put mine on the mixer, and then I'll show you here in a little bit what it looks like. Alright, let me show you what the dough's looking like. And I didn't tell you when I put my dough on the machine. I usually do it for about 7 minutes, 10 at most. If you're doing it by hand, you absolutely want to do it for 7 to 10 minutes. You want to get that bread you're not going to over knead it. It needs to be very smooth, and the elasticity is just it takes time. So challah is super easy. It's just time, measuring the ingredients, and then the time to let it rise and, you know, do what it needs to do. So this is the dough. It looks great. And I just use my scraper to get as much of that challah dough out of there as possible. Okay. So this, I usually do take my dough and I knead it by hand. You can see it's just beautiful. It's not sticky. It's not too dry. Like, it has some stickiness to it, and this is really, I believe, the key and success to a really moist, delicious pull-apart challah. You just want it to stick to a little bit, but not sticky that you're having dough all over your hands. If that were the case, then we'd add a little bit of flour, but honestly, never add flour until after you knead it, you know, for a good several minutes. But this dough is looking really good. So whether you used a machine or your hand, I still follow up with the heel of my hand, just push it into itself, turn it, and then once I've got it to the point where I'm happy with it, I had my bowl covered because I had some hot water in there while it was mixing on the mixer. And I'm just going to take some olive oil, no coconut oil, use olive oil. Coconut oil will seize up. Just use about a tablespoon or two, not much, tablespoon to 2. And then you're going to take your dough and you're just going to slather it, get it coated with that oil. So it's all covered. It's not swimming in it. It just looks covered. It looks great. Get a paper towel. And then what I do, get my plastic wrap. So we're getting ready for step 3, and that's the fermenting of the dough, which means we're going to let it rise. In the summertime, an hour to 2, usually perfect. Sometimes I have gone on errands, like right now I'm probably going to go on errands and get some stuff done. This will be just fine. I cover mine in saran wrap to keep that warmth, because that dough is really warm from mixing it. So you're going to keep all the warmth in there and then let it rise. Like I say, minimum 1 hour. 2 hours, probably good to go. And then we'll come back and I'll show you how to roll it out so we can get it braided, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so let's get our dough ready for shaping into our challah. Now I've already made mine into 6, I split them out into 6 equal dough balls. And they're about 180 grams per ball. Now if you're intimidated by making a 6-strand challah, that's fine. You can do a 3. I did use my scale to weigh them just so that they were, you know, try to make them as even as possible, but go ahead and get yours separated into 3 or 6 depending on what you're going to do. I'm going to show you how to do the 6, and I'll show you how to do a 3. We do need a rolling pin, and what that does, it just gets all the air bubbles and just allows that gluten to work in a little bit, just so that whenever we want to roll the strand out a little longer, it doesn't fight with you. So it also creates lots of layers in there. So I'm not going to spend too much time with it on this first part. I basically roll it out. I like to keep mine covered while I'm working. And I do like to keep them in order because, you know, it depends on how many minutes this takes me to roll out these 6. I want it to keep warm and let it rest. And I want to get the one that's rested longest first when I go back to it. So you're going to roll these out into a rectangle. I would say use about 10 to 12 inches as your marker, no longer than 15 inches. That's about the standard size of a cookie sheet. So just roll it out into a rectangle, roll it up. You're going to have a seam. Just press that down and gently roll without, like, apply pressure to it, not so that you're rolling the strand long, just, you know, just apply pressure, just work it in. It'll work in when we're going to do this twice for each strand. So that was strand 2. Here's strand 3. Just enjoy this time. Again, it's a time to reflect on what's happening in your world, and let this be a time of joy, and just thank the Lord for all that He's done for you and given you, just His abundant mercy. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to go over this again. Now, once we get these rolled out, if you're planning on baking it today, that's fine. I typically do mine 2 days before I want to have it, simply because the longer that yeast ferments or is in that dough, the more flavor pops out. So it allows that yeast to just really work itself, the flavor, into the dough. And if you work full time, you can absolutely do this ahead of time. For instance, this one here, I'm going to freeze this so that I can use it whenever I need it after I braid it. So, but if you're going to cook it today, what you want to do is let it rise for another hour, an hour or two, and just start your oven 30 minutes before you're ready to bake it. You want to really be sure that you're not over rising it, because it will fall flat if you let it rise too much. It'll get real airy and puffy, you'll know. But if you allow it to get too soft when it bakes, it'll just cave. So an hour to 2 hours. Again, depends on the temperature. In the winter, I've got to set it in front of a little fireplace. Just takes a little longer. But you can absolutely cook it the same day you make it. If you work and you want to make it on a Sunday, and then just do what we did today, get to this point and braid it, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do is how I prepare mine every single time. Is I braid it and then I put it on either a cookie sheet or something that'll fit into my freezer, and then I'll freeze it overnight, and then the next morning when it's solid, I'll put freezer paper over it, so that way I use it within the next couple of weeks. That way I can take it out and bake it whenever I want. Kind of like Rhodes bread, only it's only better. All right. So this was my first one I did. Let that rest for a while. When you first start rolling yours out, it might be, initially it fights back. It doesn't really have that much elasticity, but as you flattened it out and rolled it the first time and let it rest while you're rolling the other ones out, really does give it time to be manageable. See, the line's really not there. And then once you get that, just keep going. What you're trying to do is, if you want the lines out, sometimes it's pretty just to leave that seam in there and it creates a nice little line when you bake it. It's totally up to you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to roll 3, and then I'm going to show you how to do a 3 braid. If that's as far as challenged you want to be today, that's fine. All right, so here's my 3. So if you're only going to do 3, then you divide your dough up into 3 sections. They're going to be bigger than this, obviously, and it comes out really beautiful, a 3 strand. So you have 3 like that. You're going to cross one over, and then take the one on the right over. You made an X across the top. And then take the one that's in the center over. Take the left under, the right under, left under, 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 and then just pinch it and tuck. Same thing. Lift up your dough to do the other side. So just do the same thing. You're gonna go take the one that's on the top underneath first, and then under. No, let me do that. I'm gonna change my mind on that. Yeah, take it under, 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 and then pinch it off. That's all you're gonna do. Done. Now, for those that are doing, we'll do the 6 as well, because we want to get this done, and then either get it rising again for your bake today, or I'll show you how I prepare it to freeze. Or you could keep it in the refrigerator up to 48 hours. That's what I usually do. If I bake this, like if I'm going to have this, today is Thursday, if I want this for Shabbat morning, Saturday, then I will actually make it today, and then I'll bake it on Saturday morning. Now, if you want it Friday night and you want the most flavorful, just do it Wednesday. And it turns out beautifully. Okay, so we've got our 6 strands. They look great. We're going to lay 3 side by side on the right. And again, use some kind of measure. I mean, I don't go any longer. I use this like cedar plank board or your cookie sheet. This is what I'm going to set mine on with parchment paper whenever I'm done braiding. So just have some kind of measurement, make them all consistent in length, and then lay your other 3 strands on the left side. And basically you want to pinch those tops together. There's no rhyme or reason to it, just so long as they don't come apart, your braids don't come apart, but that they're going to stick together. Okay, once you have them pinched together, in Hebrew, we read from right to left. Well, we're going to number right to left. This is strand 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so we're going to take strand 2. We're going to go strand 2 over 6. Because this is 6. They don't change numbers. Now this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we're going to take 1 over 3. So this was 1, 2, 3. So we're going to take this one and then just raise it up and lift it over the top of that other one. That's called a high braid. Okay. Now we're going to take number 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to go over the number 1. And I always try to like to keep 2 and 2 in like a middle, because we're always going to come down through that middle. After a while, you'll kind of see the pattern, because this one over here, we're going to bring this number 6 now, we're going to bring that over the top of this one, in between, over 4, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to bring 6 over 4. And mine's kind of coming undone, but that's okay, just keep pinching it up top. We're going to bring 2 over 6, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to bring 2 over 6. We're going to, and try not to bring it too tight. You want to have that, you want to have some give in there. It's going to raise some more, so you don't want to be so tight. And then you're going to bring number 1 over 3, because that was 1, 2, 3. So we're going to do 1 over 3. You see how I'm just coming across the top? I'm just lifting it over, so it makes that really beautiful high peaked braid. Now we need to take 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, number 5 over 1. This is number 1. Our positions never change. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to bring 6 over 4, and number 2 over 6. We're going to take number 1 over 3. It's just repeating the pattern. Number 5 over 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to take number 6 over 4. 1, 2 over 6. We're going to take number 1 over 3. We're going to take number 5 over 1. We're going to take number 6 over 4. We're going to take number 2 over 6. We're getting close to the end. That's where it gets kind of tricky. You still want to maintain your pattern. And so I want to bring number 1 over 3. You just, make it work. Try not to stretch it to keep making your bread longer. Just, you're going to finish it out pretty soon. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to take number 5 over. And then I have the 2 and 2 separated like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to take 6 in between here. And then I would, at that point, take my number 2. When I do that, because I'm at the very end, I am just going to simply mesh them together. What you can do is roll your bread over and just make sure they're pinched tightly together. And you can just really define your, on both sides, pinch them together. And you can really define your shape when you roll it back over. Just make it look like an actual braid process. And that's it. So the beauty of a video is you can rewind and play and rewind and play. But the numbers that you want to write down is you want to do 2 over 6, 1 over 3, 5 over 1, 6 over 4, 2 over 6, and then just repeat that. And I'll have that in the link as well. But that's how I do my 6th braid, and that's all I'm going to show you today, except I have my parchment paper. I'm going to set it on there, and just make sure, again, those ends are pinched tightly together. And then I have one of those like little 13-gallon trash bag sizes that if you're going to put this in the refrigerator or freezer, doesn't matter, just lightly cover it because it's going to expand. A dough like this will, or any dough for that matter, it's going to rise at its between 65 and 75 degrees steadily. It's going to be in the refrigerator at 40 or below, so it's still going to rise. It's not going to over rise, but you're just going to cover it like that. And whether you bake it in 2 days, or if you're going to bake it today, just lightly cover it with a cloth. You can do this as well and just leave it some space. And again, the directions will be in the link. And then, I'll put this in the freezer if I want to have it within the next 2 weeks, but I don't want to bake it today. I'll put it in the freezer, and then tomorrow morning I'll go and put freezer paper around it because it'll be solid and I won't, damage my braid because they're too soft. So if you have any questions, please find me, ask Robin for my phone number, and I'll be more than happy to help you. God bless and enjoy. A couple of notes, and you will read these on your instructions with your recipe that I'll be providing. Make sure when you preheat your oven 325, I always put an extra cookie sheet underneath the pan that I'm cooking, and I actually keep them in the oven until I'm ready. So when I'm ready to put this in the oven, I'll just slide this right off of this board with the parchment paper onto the hot pan that's already in the oven that's preheated a half an hour before you need it. And that will make it so it doesn't get that crusty hard bottom on the challah. And then do not open the oven for the first 10 minutes because that's like in the first time, it'll rise the highest in that first 10 minutes, so you don't want to open it. And really at 30-35 minutes, depending on your stove at 325, it will take all of that time. In mine, it depends. If there's filling in it, special challah, it takes it took my chocolate chip cookie dough 1 hour and 15 minutes. So this should be done within 30 to 40 minutes. At the end, if it's getting too dark, you're going to want to cover it with foil. Now, before you put it in the oven, you do want to brush egg on the challah. So what I do is just get my egg room temperature, and I'll just, and that's if you're baking it that day. So the day you're baking it, before you put it in the oven, you're just going to dip it in your egg yolk. It's just a whole egg, and just be sure not to get egg trap down in the cracks, or else you're going to have some scrambled egg in your challah when it bakes. So just brush that through, let it set for 5 minutes to let that dry, and then brush it again. You know, do a second time of brushing it with your egg. And that's just your glazing. It's going to make it a beautiful brown, like light brown color, just depending. And again, make sure you foil. I usually do the ends because they get the darkest the fastest, because it's a little narrower, and then I just leave the center open, but make sure you tent that. And you know, just remember, if it's in the refrigerator for 2 days, it will not overproof, it will not over-rise, it'll be perfect. You can actually take it out and put egg wash on it and just put it in the oven if you want to, but I always let it rise for a good hour when I take it out, sometimes 2.5 hours, depending on how cold it is. So if you're going to do the refrigerator method and do it within a day or two after you made your dough to this point, then just take it out of the oven, or take it out of the refrigerator and put it to rise for about 2.5 hours in a warm spot. And then make sure you have time to brush your egg on it. I mean, don't let it over rise. You can tell because right now it's pretty firm. It's pretty firm. It'll rise some more if I'm going to cook it today, and then it'll get, you don't want it to get super soft. It should be able to spring back. If you let it over rise, when you touch it, it'll just basically cave. It'll cave when you bake it too. So careful not to do that. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. Be blessed.